Well, welcome. We are so glad that you are here joining us here today. I know there are a million things you could be doing, so always appreciate when you choose to spend your time here. And we love to give you great value. And today, I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation lined up for you. We're talking with Mitch Francis about negotiating solutions to big ass world problems. That's his term. So, welcome, Mitch. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks for having me.
And those of you who don't know him, Mitch has a new book out called Badass Solutions for Today's Big Ass Problems. And Mitch says that he was born with a problem solving gene, and we can certainly use more of that. And he's had a lifetime in business. And one axiom that jumped out for him is that roadblocks are continually going to be thrown in the way of every step that any business person takes towards achieving their goals. And that to succeed, you've got to develop those problem solving skills. And certainly Mitch has been relentlessly tenacious about that and has then turned his attention with a wider scope to solve massive cultural and national problems. And his book addresses those issues. So let's dig right in there, Mitch. What prompted you to write Badass Solutions for Today's Big Ass Problems?
Well, thanks for that introduction. I don't have much left to say. But Cindy, there was a family tragedy almost exactly 2 years ago. You may recall that in a suburb of Chicago called Highland Park, there was a 4th of July parade, and a young man with assault rifles killed 7 people. And one of those he killed was my brother-in-law's brother, with whom I'm very close.
Yeah.
And needless to say, the family was just devastated. This was a wonderful man. And I'm sure everybody says that about their loved ones, but this guy was special.
Yeah.
And it left me angry. And I stood there and our country has such huge problems, and they just aren't getting solved.
Yeah.
And I want to do something. And I have to say, it kicked my ass. I've always been kind of a news guy, sort of, current events interests. And I realized that just in things that come up, on a daily basis, I often have solutions for them that are like, well, why don't we just do this?
Yeah.
And they seem so logical. And I decided, along this idea of trying to get involved and do something about it, I did an outline. What am I even thinking about? How many
Yeah.
problems do I have, reasonable solutions for, or the beginnings of solutions for? And I finished this outline, and honestly, this is a book.
Yeah.
And Cindy, I had no intention of writing a book, but it kind of flowed out of me. I did a lot of research on questions that needed more thorough investigation and more complete solutions, and it became Badass Solutions. So this is a 2-year effort, and this just came out this summer. So it's been interesting.
Well, congrats. And I think it is so great on so many levels. I mean, in today's, well, and first, let me say, I'm so sorry about your family member, that tragic circumstances. We are seeing more of that all over the place, and such an increased polarization. And with it, unfortunately, people seem to get overwhelmed, and we all just put our heads in the sand. So I just love that you're like, hey, let's start talking about solutions. Here's some ideas I have. Let's have a discussion. I was wondering, as I was looking into your book, what was one of the most sort of surprising things that you found, either while researching or while writing the book? Anything jump out at you that caught you by surprise?
Well, actually, a lot of different things. I came up with a lot of interesting statistics, that kind of surprised me. And I think one of the things that really, really shocked me is that I felt kind of fatalistic about the rising ocean levels, global warming. The polar ice caps are melting at a rate. This is one of the statistics, are melting at a rate that would fill 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools every second.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's an amazing amount of water, and that by the end of this century, all coastal cities and islands are going to be flooded.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is, Cindy, nobody's doing really anything about this, but
Yeah.
we can. I actually found that we can stop the ocean levels from rising, and at the
Well,
same time, use all that fresh water for the billions of people living in the most parched areas of our world. That was a surprise to me. I just didn't. I
yeah.
didn't think that could be done.
Well, and let's dig in and talk about that because that's definitely caught my attention, and it's interesting because Al Gore was saying that, a long time ago now. We heard those sort of predictions and everybody poo-pooed it. But, as someone who traveled to Antarctica recently, this issue of global warming and melting ice caps really hit home.
Oh,
And
I bet.
I'd love to hear your suggested solution to the problem.
Well, it'll cost you $10.
Okay.
But here it is. So again, along this lines of investigation, I found that all this water that we were just both kind of gasping at, how much water we're talking about,
Yeah.
that it's actually only a small fraction of the water going into our oceans, just even our 20 largest rivers. So if we channel just 7% of the water in those 20 largest rivers
Yeah.
and move it to the arid lands on our planet, we can save Earth and at the same time stop hunger and thirst. It's an amazing thing, but we can do this. And it sounds just like unrealistic, I know, but there's actually a model for this. For decades, there's been a project called the Central Arizona Project, and it moves water from the Colorado River 336 miles to service 5 million people who live in Phoenix and Tucson.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly successful project that I'm telling you, it's going to a desert, and the people in Phoenix and Houston just would not. They'd be a tiny little dust town if it wasn't for this. It's enormously successful, and it came at a shockingly reasonable price for
Yeah.
for benefits for 40, 50 years. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are definitely precedents of people changing rivers, sort of paths. And I mean, there are consequences sometimes for that, long-term sort of implications. But I'm curious just to understand. So when you say, like, in terms of that helping with the sort of ice caps melting, are you
Mhm.
saying just, well, hey, this is happening, let's use that water for another purpose? Is that the concept?
Two things to answer. It's not using that water. We're taking that water is going into the ocean,
Yeah.
that melting water. And what I'm saying is reduce the amount from another source
Mm-hmm.
of the water going into the oceans, which is to rechannel just
Gotcha.
7% of the
I
water
gotcha.
in the rivers.
Okay.
So we're adding some and we're taking out some to
I gotcha.
balance out.
Yeah. Well, and I'd love to hear, because I know you've got really big ideas, which I think is fabulous about, even tackling global conflict and problems. And we've certainly had some great negotiators throughout history tackle those problems without much success, frankly. So I'd love to hear about your sort of proposed solutions. How can they work, and how did you come to them?
Well, I think it's really like what I was saying earlier, that these problems are so big and they affect all of us so much that I don't, maybe it's just in my DNA that I say, well, can't that get fixed?
Yeah.
And why is nobody doing anything about this?
Yeah.
And it just again, it's kind of my nature to say, well, what if?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my favorite saying of all. What?
Yeah.
And it leads me to great places. And I must say, with your interest in negotiating skills, it's the same thing for me.
Yeah.
I have a very extensive business background. Over 40 years, I created and have been CEO of publicly traded companies, private companies. I've developed commercial real estate. I still own and manage commercial real estate
Wow.
throughout the US.
Yeah.
And, you develop problem solving skills, negotiating skills, all of that. But there was I think for me, I would attribute success in those efforts to being able to come up with answers to what if,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
I love
and
that. And not just for and just to sort of interrupt, but to put a pin for our listeners, I would say even starting with your small, those difficult conversations, whether it's, with your kids, with your intimate partners, with business partners, these national conflicts and global, the basic premise is the same. When we approach our negotiations, when we approach these potential conflicts with curiosity, and I love that, Mitch, saying, what if, when we
yeah,
approach it from that place rather than our sort of more traditional competitive, place of ego, you
Right.
are going to get better solutions and outcomes. Carry on. Sorry, I'd love to hear, like, choose any sort of global conflict that you're kind of scratching your head
But
saying,
let me
well,
add
what is
one
this?
component to what you just said, and I think it may be obvious, but I don't hear it said much, is that, here I'm saying this process for solving problems, for negotiating
Yeah,
and selling skills are all very, very much the same.
it's true.
And you have a wonderful thrust in your I think in your whole podcast credo is all things are negotiation,
Yeah,
all of life. And it's so true. But
yeah,
it's also all things are selling. You
yeah.
you you know, my eyes were kind of opened to a family member who's a surgeon, and I was thinking, well, I'm this business guy and I have to use sales skills and negotiating skills all the time. And I found that to get clients, to get patients, I'm sorry, I should say, he has to set sales skills.
Yep.
You're
It's so
going to
true.
look great this way. Here are the problems. Here's the risks. But
Yeah,
I think I'm going to really be able to help you. And what are your concerns? Those are the same questions you would ask in probing on a sales call.
it's so true.
So it's your premise is right. In all of life, negotiation, sales skills, problem solving, it's kind of one basket.
Even selling ourselves, right? I often say our biggest negotiation is negotiating our own mindset. We're selling ourselves every day on between all the options that are available to us. So,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
so true. Yeah, so I can answer to your question. I think basically all of the problems that I address and have found solutions for kind of start off with that premise
yeah,
of kind of these basic skill sets of what's the objective? What are we trying to solve here?
yeah,
That becomes kind of easy.
yeah,
And then it's, well, what are the problems? What's this other person's
yeah,
objections on the other side? But here it's a whole,
yeah,
there's not another person, it's a whole problem, but it's the same thing again.
yeah,
So what are the problems? And probing, that's a critical skill.
yeah,
Ask the other side, what is it you're having a problem with? What is it that's not working for you here?
yeah,
Well, on a problem, you can be asking the same questions. Why isn't this getting solved? What is a problem that's in the way of maybe even obvious solutions? And then you jump into what ifs. Well,
yeah,
what if, instead of the water going into the oceans from the melting ice caps, what if we took out some of the water somewhere else?
yeah,
And that led me on a path
yeah.
of, well, wait a minute. I did research and I found that the melting ice. I had to do some algebra here. My 11th grade teacher would have been very happy with me. So I was able to find that water from melting ice caps was, as I said earlier, just a small fraction of the water going into the oceans from the 20 largest
Yeah,
rivers.
yeah,
That was an epiphany to me. It's like, wow, this what if question was
yeah,
a terrific direction
yeah.
and led me to solve this problem.
And the power of questions generally, and again, whether it's these big ass problems, as you say, these global world conflicts or problems, or even in those small daily negotiations that we have hundreds, if not thousands of on a regular basis,
Right.
ask powerful questions because then you drop the guard, right? You get a little bit more vulnerability, but you also then are seeking to truly understand the other perspective. You're opening yourself up to different perspective, which opens the space for more creative solutions. Now,
Oh,
one of the
exactly.
other things that really struck me is that, as a longtime social justice attorney, this
Mm,
growing chasm between the rich and poor has obviously, always been a concern, a long time concern of mine. And you
sure.
claim to have a simple solution. So I'd love to hear some nuggets about that.
I'm laughing because there is no simple solution. No, it's again, this is a massive problem that's affecting all of us, and I think it is threatening our country.
Yeah.
It's massive, as you said perfectly. It's a massive chasm
Yeah.
between the rich and poor, the have and have-nots. And again, what's the cause here? What's the issue? And I think that I was able to discover that we had a protection that our founding fathers thought was incredibly important. And I think they were right. And that is that this country will succeed if everybody starts at the same place.
Yeah.
If everybody has equal opportunities.
Yeah.
What a thought. What an incredible revolutionary thought. And it was. These guys were brilliant. But then they took it a step farther and they said, well, what's going to do that? And particularly a couple of the main founding fathers came up with the idea that the way to do that is public schools.
Mm-hmm.
That if everybody basically has the same education opportunities, they're starting at the same starting point.
Yeah.
They may come from a wealthier family, they may come from poverty, but if they have the opportunity of a great education, the sky's the limit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we have evolved into something else.
Yeah.
We have private schools.
Yeah.
And my contention is that the people who are wealthy in our country and also put a very high value on education, put their kids in private schools. And people who can't afford private schools have their kids in public schools. They contribute to public schools for sure. They make them as good as they can be. And we have some really good public schools. We have a lot of great teachers. But when you put a student who's had an education from K to 12 in a private school where their parents have paid $30,000 to $50,000 a year, like college, and say, okay, you have an opportunity to go out and succeed in our system, or a child who's gone through most of our public system, there's a huge chasm that you said between the rich and the poor, and it's going to continue.
Yeah.
And that just struck me in the face that here is this dream. It was really mostly John Adams, I think, who championed this idea of public schools. And public schools have to be great. They have to be incredible for every single student in our country. Yeah. And how are you going to do that? Well, what's amazing is we've taken the people who have power and money and understand the quality of the importance of a quality education completely out of the public school system, didn't we?
Yeah.
Our kids aren't there. It's not that they don't care, but their kids aren't there. They're not in there fighting for a great public education. So how are we going to get them back into in caring and using their political influence and using their money to make sure that public schools are great? Well, my solution is radical. A lot of people will hate me, but guess what? We need to outlaw private schools. Yeah. We can't have private schools. We can't have a landed aristocracy where people who have money give their children an automatic pass into success and everybody else is miles behind. Yeah. We can't do that. This is a mistake.
And we need to be having that discussion. There's no question. Because I mean, it's so patently obvious. Education is the great equalizer, right? And speaking. No, I support, but I love that you recognize, because again, I have this debate repeatedly and people jump all over me, right? And, in Canada, similarly, much like, well, for myself, I grew up in a low rental, apartment in what was considered a pretty tough complex. Money was always an issue for our family. And I was one of those lucky few who did have the opportunity to have a good experience and got sent to a different public school than the catchment area I was supposed to be in, because the principal in grade 8 pulled me aside on graduation day and said, hey, if I could get you over here, would you go? And
you're lucky.
Very lucky. But
still public. You certainly merited that kind of treatment, but how wonderful.
Well, and it shouldn't be a one-off where out of, whatever 2,000 people in that high school, I got a chance to get sort of pulled out given my background. But same with healthcare, I think, Mitch, right? I mean, certainly in Canada, we had a public system that was exceptional, and more in Canada, we're seeing that adoption as the private started sneaking in. Much like you, I was very vocal. We can't allow this. We can't allow this. Same with the private schools. We can't be giving tax credits to people if they're going to send their kids to private school. That money needs to go to the public system. Our healthcare needs to stay public, or we're going to have different levels of medical care for the rich and the poor. So I love that you're out there advocating for that. And I hope, and for our listeners, regardless of where you are in the political spectrum, open to have these discussions, meaningful discussions, get curious, and as Mitch says, ask, what if, right? What if? Now, I want to swing back to
I,
mindset.
I just have to tell you, I love what you just said, and I would amplify the non-partisan, non-political
Yeah,
aspect of this. Who gives a damn if the
yeah,
Republicans or the
yeah,
Democrats like what we're saying?
yeah,
We need to solve these problems.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
give us the best solutions. Quit fighting over ideology. This is
yeah.
it's so in the way.
Well, and what a timely message. So I love that you're putting this out there and inviting this discussion. And part of that I think ties in with what I was going to say, coming back to mindset, because this polarization we're seeing is a mindset problem, right? People are
Yeah.
digging in more and more confirmation bias as they only explore, mediums that support the views they already have. So what advice do you have for how we can negotiate our mindset to be more open, show up more powerfully, and start maybe having more meaningful dialogue, getting better outcomes?
Well, that's a pretty big ask, and it is. But I think that we have to dig deep
Yeah,
within ourselves and get past, I guess most of us have a tendency to affiliate with one party or another. But I tell you something that's been really exciting for me is that I realize, maybe I'm in a little cocoon of people just like me, but I've really come to realize that almost everybody I talk to are conservative on some things
yeah,
and liberal on other
that's
things.
true.
And and how wonderful to have that openness, that observation of what's good and what's not good. And we have to stop turning around and saying, well, I need to fit into this square peg and I need to fit into this round peg. I think in my writing, there are times where people think, oh, they got me nailed. I'm a Democrat asshole. Or, oh, I got him pegged this time. He's a Republican asshole. And it was actually very important to me to be neither.
Yeah,
And I never declare. I want to be independent of that kind of bias. And I think we all, in answer to your question, Cindy, I think we all need to be like
yeah,
clear,
yeah,
push all that nonsense aside. What's the issue here? What's the
yes,
solution here? How can we fix?
yeah. I love that. And actually even applying the model that you're suggesting as the negotiation for the big issues, I think, Mitch, you apply that same model for when we're negotiating our own mindset, right? Like, yes, we've
Oh,
been
good point.
conditioned to be a certain way. What if we got curious with ourselves? What if I was open to this other perspective? What if we considered this as a possibility? Just opening yourself up to the possibility of having the dialogue. You don't have to agree, but just be open to the perspective, right? And I
Wow.
think a step further, argue the other side, right? Back in debates, if you remember in public school, we used to have to debate the other
Yes.
side. So take the
Very
opposite
powerful.
position.
Wait a minute. I got to write this down. You just gave me another chapter. Hold on a second. So
I
note
love
this
that.
down. To have that debate within ourselves, yes, I think that's necessary, and it's really great. We got to stay open. We have to stay questioning. We have to stay solution oriented.
Yeah. Yeah. Now
Oh,
you
that
had
was
talked earlier about kind of the skills involved in negotiation. I'd love, like, what do you see as some of the traits that we need to be looking for in our leaders, whether, national, political, community level, in our education systems, in our healthcare? What should we be looking for as the traits to help us start negotiating a better world, would you say?
well. There are many. I'm frustrated where so many of our leaders, are just running around with their hair on fire,
Yeah.
just screaming about problem after problem after problem, or the blaming the other side.
Yeah.
That just gets us nowhere.
Yeah.
And I find very few who offer solutions or even seem to be interested in solutions. Like on the economy right now, this is very forefront, with the deficit that we have,
Yeah.
and nobody's addressing how do we pay off $35 trillion in debt. They both sides blame each other, and every once in a while, somebody will say, well, let's tax more.
Yeah.
or let's spend less. And we're in so deep
Yeah.
that, it'll take, 5 lifetimes if we, spend less or tax more, to get out of this kind of hole. So we need people who will pursue solutions in a big thinking kind of
Yeah.
way. And I tell you something, I have a solution for paying off the entire debt. It's pretty detailed, but we can pay off it's now, as of a week ago, it's now $35 trillion of debt.
Insane.
And that debt's growing by another $1 trillion, Cindy, every 100
Yeah.
days.
Yeah. And at
We're
some
just-
point, the numbers get so big that I think people are just in a state of absolute overwhelm about it. And I want to just put a pin before we move on to for our listeners, because a couple of things you said there I think are really worth doubling down on. And one
well,
is that sorry?
that's a first. That's never happened to me before.
I think that we were full of gold nuggets here, Mitch. Are you kidding? But for our listeners, I want you to really think as well about the issue of blame. And again, whether at the micro or the macro level, whether it's in your personal relationships, your professional relationships, or the global issues that we are facing, get away from the blame game. It is not healthy for any relationship. There is nothing productive to be gained by the finger pointing exercise. Whether we talk about gender issues, even as somebody who's such an advocate, it drives me crazy when when we talk about gender bias and women will immediately think it's gender bias by men against women. We're never going to solve the problem if it's about blame, as opposed to recognizing we hold gender bias against other women ourselves and even against ourselves. Studies show women perform more poorly when they check off their gender before writing their SAT exam. So stop with the blame game, be open to solutions is just so important. And the other thing you said that I really want to put a pin in is this crisis. You said about running around with the hair on fire. We have become a society that is driven by constant crises, and the media feeds this frenzy, and the
Oh,
political
yeah.
system feeds this frenzy. Stop, drop, and roll, right? Instead, when you're faced with an issue, get out of crisis mode, do some breathing exercises, and start, as Mitch has suggested, get curious. Ask, okay, here's this big ass problem that just seems insurmountable. What if this? And don't be afraid to have crazy ideas at first, and have those discussions with your family, within your community. And let's start getting back to having some meaningful, healthy dialogue instead of blaming and shaming and being in constant crisis mode. So thank you for
My
sharing.
gosh, you're damn good at this.
Yeah.
Impressive. That's
Now,
great.
do you have any non-negotiable habits that you're committed to daily, Mitch?
That's interesting. Aside from like brushing my teeth.
Yeah, I totally sort of came out of left field with that on you there. I just love to, but we talk about how we show up more powerfully and just maybe have some creative ideas. I typically will ask that question, not always, but often, because I think the more we share and plant seeds with other people about, whether it's a gratitude practice, or for you, presumably part of it is about asking what are some of your non-negotiables, things
Yeah,
that you try to
you answered the question for me, because if there's anything, I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I'm just incredibly fortunate, and I'm appreciative every single day, and acknowledge how lucky I am, and I take some moments to reflect on, yeah, but not everybody's this well off. Not everybody's this lucky.
Yeah.
You got to give back. I'm trying, I'm trying, like with this book, to help. My last chapter is actually about how we all can give back and how important it is. And what are the steps? How do you get involved? How do you do something? And like you said earlier, these problems are so big. We feel like they're just Mount Everest against us, and we can't do anything, but we can. I mean, all of us can contribute to solving these problems. If you find, one, two, or three of these issues that are dear to your own heart, and a solution that you can say, oh, this could happen. This could, this could change the world positively. I could sign on to this. Well, here's how you get involved. And there's a fabulous guiding light kind of for me, which was from Mahatma Gandhi. And he said, when the people lead, the leaders will follow.
Yeah.
And it's meaningful to me. Yeah,
Yes.
it's meaningful to me. And if I can spread that word and get people involved, not just saying, oh, yeah, that's a cool
Yeah.
solution, but yeah, I'd like to get involved. I'd like to join an organization that can
Yeah.
make this happen. Yeah, that's the
Oh,
best.
and what a great message today, especially because I think we're coming with it from the opposite perspective. I mean, democracy is supposed to be about sort of from the people up, from the grassroots up, and we seem to have flipped that on its head. And again, just put a pin for our listeners there. When you talk about that giving back, it's like we've sort of forgot. We pay a lot of lip service to, I'll donate to charity, but one of my passions, one of the things that started me on this mission with the art of, feminine negotiation, which ironically is not gender based. It's about, let's redefine success, right? Not make it about getting collaborative outcomes instead of win-lose. Let's redefine power instead of always trying to exert power over others. What about the power of gratitude? What about the power of service? Showing up, giving unconditionally, whatever it is you've got to offer within your family, within your community, and the broader, so that you don't feel a sense of overwhelm. It helps get you out of overwhelm and into action. So I think they're beautiful. And I must say, Mitch, I love that you bring such a sense of humor. I mean, these are big issues and controversial issues, and most people get so beat your chest about it.
Yeah.
And it gives me hope for the future that you show up with such humor and grace and ease about it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, I call them big ass. Yeah.
And I can't believe this. Our time has gone so quickly here together, and this has been such an interesting conversation. I really encourage for our listeners, go check out the book, start the dialogue, whether you agree or disagree with the solutions proposed. What a fabulous launch pad to have the discussions. And Mitch, I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've ever had in your life? And again, not necessarily about solutions, not about your book or these issues, but just one day when you had sort of one of those aha moments that made you look at things differently, live life differently.
Oh, that's a great question. And it's easy for me to answer. And it speaks to the most intelligent thing that anyone's ever said to me. When I first started in business, I was a real estate broker, commercial real estate broker, and I did several deals in a very short period of time. And one of the secretaries in this office where I worked was congratulating me, and I was kind of modest, and I said, "Well, I was just in the right place at the right time." And she got angry at me. She said, "No, that's not it." She said, "The important thing is not being in the right place at the right time. It's knowing you are."
Oh,
And it
oh,
just stuck with me.
yeah. I have
It's-
never heard that, and I love that. Oh my gosh, that is a powerful shift. I could see that.
and a lot of my business success
Yeah,
has been identifying opportunities.
yeah,
Not that I was just in the right place at the right time, because opportunities are going by all of us like a river all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But it's seeing an opportunity, knowing it's the right thing for me and what I might be able to do with it. And I've had great success in my life with that.
Oh, I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to spread that one around with your permission. I love that.
I can avoid, yeah, it's I'm stuck on this $10 thing. Every $10 every royalty.
Okay. Well, I'll promote your book, get you all kinds of $10 back. so, so where can people learn? Speaking of your book, where can people learn more about you, Mitch? Where should we be directing them?
Well, two things. For the book, go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. But Amazon is easy if you just type in "badass solutions" with or without the hyphen, or Mitch Francis. You go right to the book, and there's bad-solutions.com, which is the website. So you'll know more about me than you want to know.
Yeah. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. So if you happen to be driving right now, you're listening to this podcast and you're not able to write it down, no panic. Make a point of coming back and checking it out. Check the show notes and you'll have all that contact information for Mitch and his book. And I always encourage as well, absolutely Amazon, Barnes and Noble, those big players. And don't be afraid, go ask at your local bookstore as well. Try and encourage them to get it into the bookstore. That's always a great asset for authors. And when you read it, make sure to review the book as well. It helps promote the book and get the word out. So thank you so much, Mitch. It's been such a pleasure and such a great conversation.
Cindy, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. And for our listeners, I'm sure you enjoyed this and not only enjoyed it, but I think got a lot of value from it. I hope it's opened up your perspective, regardless of whatever views you have about some of the issues we discussed. I hope that every listener walks away with an intention to be a little bit more open, to maybe kickstart some of these dialogues and questions themselves and start asking what if of yourself and the people in your life. Make sure to give the gift of sharing, subscribe to the podcast, get others to subscribe, share this episode with the people in your life. We could maybe start a movement where people do actually start asking what if and getting a little more curious, and what a gift that would be to the world. And before we sign off today, I'd like to share some of the ways we can work together. If you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills and recognize that all of life is a negotiation, I've got everything from online to group to my signature mastermind and VIP experiences. It'll help you better leverage your innate power, because we've all got it, so that you can get more of what you want and deserve in life while getting better outcomes for all. And if that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Be sure to grab a copy of my book if you have not done that yet, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom. And that is a wrap for this episode. Until next time, go forth, negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.